Okay friends, good afternoon. We're here with the UptaCraft shop, but we are off-site. We're actually at the scene of a takedown of a few large red oak trees. And we're gonna try our hand at doing a little bit of sawmilling using a chainsaw jig. And this is the first time for us. We're gonna give it a shot and see what kind of slabs we can harvest out of these raw goods. Had the good fortune of having a cousin who had to take down 3 massive red oak trees, probably 30 inches across the butt. So we should be able to get a fair amount of board footage out of it. So stick with us. We'll kind of walk you through some step-by-steps, not necessarily play-by-play, but just the highlights maybe, and a little bit talking about the experience we have using the chainsaw and the jig. Let's talk about at least how we're equipped today. Let me turn my camera around here. Okay, so we got a big old Dolmar chainsaw with a 36-inch bar on it. Got my little tool kit, tape, level, screw gun. Also got a smaller here, like a Husqvarna 455 Rancher. Nice little saw for everyday use. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with using these jigs right here. What these are intended to do is, if you come over here on the end of the log, the intention is to mount them level on the end of the log. Okay, just screwing them right into the end grain. And then what you have here are these little saddles here on the end, one on each side. We're going to be using some 2x4s that I got, fairly straight ones from the lumber yard. Those 2x4s, the 2 side-by-side ones, are going to be set level and parallel with each other, the length of the log, and that's going to be how we start. It'll be what the jig rides on to create our first flat surface on this log. Okay, so you can see here I've got 3 screws in this holding it on to the end of the log, and we got our bubble stick telling us where we want to be. So we'll do it the same thing on the other end, and then we'll go to the right end of the first little challenge. This log is longer than my 2x4s. The straightest 2x4s I could find, and the longest of the straightest, were only 10 feet long. Looks like this log is in the neighborhood of about 14 feet long. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to try thinking outside the box. That's what we do here at UptaCraft. And instead of putting my other bracket on the far end of the log, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice into the log about 9 feet, 9.5 feet back. And I'm going to set my bracket down into the chainsaw kerf and screw it in there. Take my jig and go as far as I can on this, then reset the jig, shifting the 2x4 down to reach past the end of the log. And I think that's how we're going to try to make our first cut here. This is only a challenge on the first cut, because once I have a flat surface on top of this log, the log now becomes what the jig rides on and not these 2x4 bridges that I'm making. Stick with me, we'll see how it goes. We'll tell you the good and the bad. We just found our first good use for the old 455 this morning. We'll save the 36-inch chainsaw for the big stuff. What we've done is just taken a wedge-shaped piece out of this log. It's going to give me a nice flat surface to mount this other jig, the bracket. So you'll see it in a minute. Here we have our 2 2x4s set up and screwed off, and these little brackets. Let's just double check ourselves here real quick with the bubble stick. Okay, well, here we are showing just a little bit off on that, but that's something I can definitely adjust. Question is it consistent? Okay, yes. Okay, and not so much. Okay, so this end, I'm going to raise this 2x4 here on the right, and that way it's not so much that this needs to be level, it's that these 2 2x4s need to be coplanar. So as long as the bubble is reading the same all the way along these, it will not matter the level. It only matters that it's straight. I'll make the adjustment on the one piece of 2x4 down there on the other end, and we'll be ready to set up our chainsaw jig. Alright, so what we have here is, well, it's a thickness jig for cutting slabs out of a log. I've looked it over though, and it looks like the build quality, it would be adequate for what I want to do. All the welds look in decent shape. The gauge of the material seems to be adequate. We're going to be gentle with it anyways. So we have our saw here, again with a 36-inch bar. And what this does is the bar will actually fit through here, and this will clamp the bar. There's actually a thickness, a block of metal in there. That'll keep these sides from ever coming in contact with the chain, but still clamping the bar tightly. And it'll do the same thing on this end. And then of course you have here just a guard to protect against the end of the bar as it's operating. So we'll get this thing clamped in place and see how it goes. Interesting thing number one, I'm assembling the saw. The saw is now in the jig, but notice this. I actually had to take this whole assembly and move it in, what's that, about 8 inches? So even though this is nominally for a 36-inch chainsaw bar, I guess I could accommodate a longer bar if I wanted to, if I wanted to max out the length of these rails. I don't, and so let's give it a shot as it is. I'll tighten down all the bolts and we're soon ready to start this bad boy up. And I'm going to go through this from a mental checklist standpoint just to make sure. That's a good way to operate no matter what you're doing. Whenever you're dealing with machinery, things with any kind of measure of complexity, and also anything where there's an opportunity to injure yourself, to just go through and double check things and check them off as having been checked, double checked, maybe even sometimes triple checked. So what I've done here is I'm going to go through here and first look at the saw. Okay, I just got done filling up the fuel, filling up the bar oiler. The chain has been sharpened. Okay, so the saw is good to go. From the jig standpoint, I have just double checked both of these bolts. They are tight, so that's clamping the bar there. These bolts here are tight, so it's clamping the other end of the bar. Okay, up here, where I've adjusted the length, I've retightened these nuts, lock nuts, this screw and lock nut. On the other end, this and this lock nut have all been tightened and checked. This screw and lock nut have all been double checked. The lock nuts on this auxiliary handle have been double checked for tightness. Okay, so what's left? Well, what's left is setting the height adjustment. We've gotten the length adjustment right. Now we're going to set the height adjustment. How do we do that? Well, we got to do a little bit of simple math and some measuring. What we've got to take into consideration is this. In order to get a slice on the end of this log, the slice has to be below the metal bracket, okay? And any fasteners that might be going in anywhere other than horizontally. Fortunately, that's really not a consideration. All the fasteners that I've used on the brackets on both ends are going in mostly horizontally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the height from the top of these 2x4s to about 1 inch below this bracket. That's going to be the elevation that I set the chainsaw bar up in relation to the rails that will ride on top of these 2x4s. So I'll take those measurements, I'll set it up, and we should be good to go for our first cut. All right, so as I described here, as far as picking my dimensions, what I've done is I've taken a measurement from the top of the 2x4 to the bottom of the bracket, roughly 6 1/8 inches, okay? So what I did is I'm allowing for another inch, roughly 7 1/8 inches, which is where I want my blade to land. So I come over here, and because it's not easy to take a dimension from this rail at an angle to this blade, what I did is I took my dimensions from this bracket up, instead. So I had to add the thickness of this rail, which is 1 1/8 inches. So 7 1/8 plus 1 1/8 inches, that's 8 1/4. So what I've done is I've taken a dimension from here to the bar, and if you come over here and take a look with my handy dandy helper here who's doing my filming, you can see that my chain is landing exactly on 8 1/4 inches here and 8 1/4 inches here. So nervous, but we're going to give it a go. I take it back. I'm not nervous. I am wicked excited. Bear with me. Just a few minutes, we're going to make our first cut. We're going to make some sawdust, buddy. Okay, made it through the first slab. The old 36-incher did the job for me. Let's put this bad boy down and open up the present. Up over here for a sec. I do want to tell you, this idea worked out awesome. I was able to extend the straight edge out, continue it on, and I think you're going to find we're going to have a nice flat board here in a second. Watch my fingers. Drum roll, please.
Boom.
Watch your toes. I don't know about you, but I can live with that. See if I can get my handy, pretty assistant come down here.
I'll be right there,
Me.
Jason.
Yeah, both of them. Come on over here, and I want you to sight down the top of this and see if you can see how flat this board came out. Just come right down to a low angle here and see if you can show just how flat that bad boy is.
Oh yeah.
Okie dokie. More to come.